Alright, this will be the comment response for is WoW a good single player game? Or something like that. Let's go straight into the comments. I was talked into playing WoW about 2.5 years ago, right before the Legion launch. My boyfriend talked me into it. I had only 1 year experiencing playing another MMO. When we started WoW, there was a bit of a learning curve for me, as a lot of the things in game did not make sense. I pushed through, playing with my boyfriend and his online friends until all of his friends went on to other games and were not returning. Then my boyfriend and I played together for a while, and then he went on to those other games. I kept on playing with WoW. I became very interested in pet battles and mounts and toy collecting. I can speak the lore a little and know the names of places we need to go. If it was not for the fact that WoW extends itself into the single-player element, I probably would not have finished my first year of that game. I agree with you that there is also a challenge to completing a quest by yourself, when WoW says you should have multiple players working together to accomplish the goal. I am not a raider, so the only time I look for assistance is when I'm stuck on something. That is when more is usually better. I am not above teamwork. In fact, I was one who got a group of strangers together to get the hive mind mount. I would just rather do things at my own pace, without getting yelled at because I'm slow. I got kicked out of my first dungeon because I was picking up the loot, or because my goals are not the same as the group's. I work in the public, a lot of conflict resolution in my job. I just want to come home after work, detach, and focus on WoW. Yeah, good thing. There's a lot to do in the game, and there's tons and tons of things to collect, and they keep adding stuff to it, and some of the things require really hard grinds to get. Like, if you want something to play endlessly forever, WoW is definitely a game for that. And it's interesting to note that a lot of the people who are replying to this were also people who work in places where they had to talk to a lot of people. And then the last thing they wanted to do was talk to people on WoW when they got home. So I was like, well, I'm glad I wasn't the only one like that, because I kind of felt like I was one of the few people who saw WoW in that light, considering I know so many people who are like shy in real life, and when they get on WoW, it's finally the time they got to make friends and talk to other like-minded people.
Did you accidentally summon me?
No, Siri. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I think WoW's first and foremost a social game. It is an MMO, and the game is designed around group/social play. However, I do think it is a mountain of things to satisfy solo players, which has led to a lot of its success. It means you can play when your friends are not online, or not? I think I keep reading that wrong. Blizzard has essentially just broadened their audience. I play solo 90% of the time, but I am still happy to chat and guild or group up for stuff. I think WoW's success is it caters to both groups. Should it be purely a social or solo game? No, I think you can do both, albeit with minor sacrifices either way. Also, what sport did you play in high school? So this guy brings up a good point. It's not the fact that WoW is a good single-player game only. It's the fact that it has both of those things in it, and the potential to do more outside of the solo game is what gives the solo game its meaning. Because as some other people point out, if you were only going to look at WoW as a solo game, it's not a very good one. There's so many other better solo games you could play. But then again, it's like, why do people prefer to play WoW as their solo game of choice? And this brings up a good point that, there's also the potential for harder group content in there. Which is neat. And also, what sport did you play in high school? I played football. I also played, I guess you don't say you played track. I was a thrower in track. I also did a little bit of wrestling. I just played sports. Mainly football and track, though. And I was pretty good at it, too. Alright, this next one, pretty long. I don't think there's too many long ones, though. Before I say anything, let's make two things clear. Number one, all of this is just my opinion, you know the drill. Number two, everyone enjoys different things, and that is fine. If you really enjoy playing a game in some unusual way, don't let anyone stop you. I knew a person who played Skyrim for hundreds of hours just murdering people without doing any of the actual content, and she had lots of fun. Yeah, people like to enjoy things in sometimes really unusual ways. That being said, I can tell you why I personally would never play WoW as a single-player game. I actually left WoW before WoD exactly because I felt the social aspect was ignored in favor of the convenient single-player content. LFG, LFR, etc. Again, nothing wrong with it, just not my thing. So for me, Classic is the only version of the game worth playing. The main thing is the social aspect of Classic WoW is the only thing the game excels at. Every other aspect of the game, some other game does better. So playing it as a single-player game is like playing a mediocre game with a monthly fee. Instead of doing that, I buy games during the Steam sale, which are superior to WoW in so many ways. I can give you examples of games I played recently and things they do way better than WoW. Witcher 3, story, world building, graphics. Subnautica, immersion, progression systems. Shadow of War, huge spectacle, giant battles. Dark Souls 3, combat systems, challenging bosses. Any roguelike, I play a lot of them. Infinitely repeatable content with slight changes every time. Smite, PvP. I really have no reason to play WoW as a single-player game because all of my needs are covered better in other games. It would be like playing Minecraft for the story. Not impossible, and some people might be into it, but I prefer just trying a different game that focuses on that specific thing. Alright, this brings up some good points. The social aspect being, not as good as it used to be in vanilla WoW. Definitely the cause of a lot of the conveniences they added to the game. When things are convenient, you don't really need to talk to people, which I think is great. But also, I'm not trying to argue that it didn't ruin the social aspect, because it totally did. I personally just don't like the social aspect, so it's not a big deal to me. But that could be like, the big deal to other people that would cause them to quit or, start the game. Which is completely understandable. That's more of like differences of opinion. I don't think you're wrong for enjoying the social aspect of the game. That's fine. I just don't. And also, all the things he gave Witcher 3, I've heard nothing but good things about it. Same with Subnautica, Shadows of War, Dark Souls. Roguelikes, I'm not a huge fan of those, but, if you do like them, that's cool. And Smite for your PvP game, my PvP game of choice is Heroes of the Storm. I haven't really been able to play it recently, though. Like, when I heard Heroes of the Storm was being killed off, I was like, man, I haven't played that game in forever. So I started playing it again. I was having so much fun. That game is a blast. Especially as someone who really likes the MOBA genre. Too bad my hands hurt, so I can't really play it as much anymore. One of these days, my hands will be healed and I can play video games again. But that's neither here nor there. But anyways, all that to say, yes, I agree. There's other games out there that definitely are better single-player games. But then that also, begs the question, should you start a new game like Witcher 3, which, has tons of good reviews and you'd probably like, or should you stick with a game you've been playing for 10 years and just farm out, another mount or work on your professions or any of the other things you could do in the game? It's like, which one's a better use of my time? Learn a completely new game and all of its combat systems and world and lore that I'm unfamiliar with? Or relax and play WoW, in which I know everything in the game, to like a fanatical degree, and there's still so much for me to do. Which one would be more relaxing to me? Oh, I know, it's definitely the WoW thing. But also, that's just because I don't really have any free time. And when I do have free time, I want to relax on my free time. So I avoid playing new games, but I'm also very open to trying new games. Like on the weekends when I take my days off, that's when I'll usually try a new game. And, there's many single-player games I played, within the past couple of years that I've definitely enjoyed more than WoW. It's just, once you beat those games, you're over. There's nothing else to do with them unless you want to go and do challenges and stuff. Whereas with WoW, you can't really beat the game, which I think is another one of its pluses. And if you want a really good example of a great single-player game, I'd highly recommend Ori and the Blind Forest. I'm really looking forward to Ori 2 coming out soon. It's just a magnificent Metroidvania. Alright, on to the next one. I play single-player now because my medical conditions, multiple sclerosis and sciatica, I can't say that. Make it difficult for me to do things where I need to stay sitting for a while, or be on a set schedule, such as a raid schedule. I used to do more social activities, however, since my health issues have infringed on those, I do much more single-player stuff now while listening/participating in guild chat on Discord. Or listening to videos from content creators. I should probably interject right here to say, I do the same thing. Most of my video game time is spent with a YouTube playlist on in the background. There's definitely people I could be chatting to instead. I have friends who are very chatty, would love to talk all the time. But I would rather just have on my YouTube playlist. Because I am just very antisocial. Let's continue. I've come to enjoy being able to pick and choose when I want to be social, all while doing single player activities. I will run with guilds for islands, but seeing as I'm more addicted to them than they are, I mostly queue for them on my own. Yeah, I do the same. It's really killing me not to be able to cap out my 2 max level tunes on islands every week. But, I need to rest my hands. Anyways, I find the best part about being a single player game is that you can do what I want, when I want, on whatever tune I want. I feel free to be myself, if that means spending time on lore, randomly questing, pet battling all day, running islands for a few hours, whatever. If someone in the guild needs help, say needs a gem cut, help running an old raid for an achieve they're working on, etc., I am more than willing to help, but I'm still able to enjoy my solo play. Alright, see, this guy, he got it all down. He's like, this is kind of how I do things. Especially the pet battling all day part. But especially the multiple health problems thing. Except, thankfully, mine aren't as serious as his. Alright, next question, or comment. I played World of Warcraft 2 on day 1 release and was an avid fan. When WoW was introduced, I was beyond pumped. I had the game day 1 and even took 3 weeks of vacation to play the game. It was the first MMO I had ever played and I loved it. It was my first MMO. I had little experience of what I was doing. I started as a dwarf, holy paladin, and stayed with the spec until max level. I had zero interest in the social aspect of the game. It almost seemed unnecessary, as the world was huge, and except for a few quests, didn't require any grouping. And this is coming from someone who leveled as a holy paladin vanilla. Oh shit. For those of you who don't know, paladins in vanilla WoW were terrible for leveling up with, because they did no damage. A holy paladin is even worse. I did group, but only to complete those instance quests. It wasn't until I started trying to find groups for solo/LBRS/UBRS, which when I started running them was 10/15 man raids. The game took on a more multiplayer aspect. This is when I joined my first guild, and it was just to run instances. Over time, at max level, the game turned into more of a multiplayer experience, as I moved away from leveling and jumped headfirst into raiding, which took up 90% of my time once MC landed, but on all my alts through Wrath, it was a single-player experience, and I always found content hadn't seen in a previous run. I did group a few times with real-life friends when leveling, but I never found it as enjoyable as when I played as a single-player game. Yeah, same. And this is how I played through Wrath. Leveling was a single-player content, max level was my multiplayer experience. That's just what I thought WoW was, a giant single-player game with a massively multiplayer aspect. I still believe that to an extent to this day. Yeah, I totally get you. When I first started playing WoW, I talk about how I was super busy all the time and, WoW was my escape from talking to people. But, once high school ended, and I could actually start raiding, because, another big reason I didn't do any multiplayer content was because my main was a hunter. And finding a group on an undergeared hunter, where, you need raid dungeon gear in order to do anything, and you can't get a dungeon gear unless you find a group, and no one wants to invite a brand new hunter with blue items barely. It was really hard for me to actually find groups. I didn't really want to put the time into it. So that was also a big reason why I never, did anything at max level until the Dungeon Finder came out. And that basically solved all my problems, and I was able to get a full set of dungeon gear, which allowed me to then look for a raid team and, presto, easy peasy. But also, this was at the time when I was no longer in high school. So, with no longer having to go to school all day and, do sports for 4 hours after it, instead, all I did was my part-time job on the weekend. So I had 5 days of free time since I took a year off of, classes after high school before I entered college. And during that year, when I had all the free time in the world, that's when I experienced my most amount of social content, because in Cataclysm, I ran in 3 raid teams, and I would help out a friend with his raid team whenever they needed me to fill in. I also ran an RBG group, and I would always try to get arenas in, so I was constantly doing battlegrounds and dungeons, raiding basically every day. And the days I wasn't raiding, I was organizing raided battleground groups. And all of those things required tons of communication, especially since I was the leader of the RBG group and one of the raid teams. So, there was no single player content at that point. It was just me constantly talking to people because I had transitioned into the end game multiplayer, I have all the time in the world and I don't go outside anymore phase of my life. And it was during that point of my time playing WoW that I met a lot of the friends I still talk to today, just because I met so many people. But when you're talking to so many people all the time, I also met some unsavory people, but that's just kind of the trade-off you have when you talk to people. Not all of them are going to be good. But this is just another experience that I didn't even really think to bring up when I made the original video. Next comment. I think playing WoW as a single-player game is like going to the mall to eat alone. You like seeing other people around, but you don't want to interact with them. See, this is just a good thought. Oh, that's true. Next comment. As someone who really likes the game, I think it's an okay single-player game. The game has always been able to be played solo. Back in vanilla, you could reach max level solo and run some pretty good dungeons with people you never talk to again. Nowadays, you just have more things to do. Nowadays you just have more things you can do solo, but overall the game really does still need a lot of players for the hardest content. Compare this to the other huge single-player games, and I say no way close, but on its own, yeah, it's okay. Sure, WoW it's an okay single-player game, but if you want to do the most challenging content in the game, you have to group up. Which I say, bring back more Mage Tower-like challenges, or more Brawlers Guild things. Make the Brawlers Guild actually hard again, like it was in Mist of Pandaria. Next comment. 2 things. A, you don't play single-player simply because you've mentioned several times how much time you invest in the auction house, a massively multiplayer element. B, it's a decent single-player experience, but why would you go for WoW instead of Witcher, Dragon Quest, or many other better single-player experiences? I chose this comment because he brings up a good point in his A question. It's not a single-player game if you're playing the auction house, because in order to play the auction house, you need other people to buy stuff from you. Which, yes, that's fair. But also, I'd counter, when you're playing the auction house, sure, it's real people on the other side who are buying things, but you never have to interact with them. It's all done through a third-party system. It's almost like selling all your stuff to an NPC vendor who then sells it to other people. Sure, it can't exist without other people, but auctioning can still be seen as a solo experience because you don't have to deal with other people. That's kind of a weird situation. Because, on one hand, you're right, but on the other hand, auctioning is a super solo player experience. And your B point, yeah, that's true. There's better single player games out there than WoW. But also, I think WoW kind of has a couple of things in its advantage, in the fact that the game never ends. It's constantly updating. And it feels like your things matter more, because when you accomplish something in WoW, you get to keep that accomplishment 5 years from now. Whereas if you accomplish something in Witcher, for example, 5 years from now when they make a new Witcher game, it's not going to matter anymore. I mean, I don't really care about that kind of thing, but that is a big motivator for a lot of people. And while I may say I don't care, I guess I do to an extent as well. Oh geez, this next comment is quite a doozy of a comment. Okay, so I think it is, but at the same time, it's really not. To make sense of what I mean, I'll explain my reasoning in more detail because it gets convoluted rather quickly. WoW has a lot of content on offer that requires little to no direct player-to-player interactions, fishing, mining, questing, etc., as well as cross-player interactions of varying degrees, auction house, dungeons, raids, mythic guilds, etc. Both aspects are intrinsically dependent on each other because there's very little to do that doesn't lead to a personal goal. Gold farming, crafting, pet/mount/transmog collecting. I think that's basically the point I made with the auction house thing. So, nice reaffirming of my opinions. Or my reasoning or whatever. By design, WoW is a game that has no real ending, like the previous Warcraft games. Different genres, I know, but same franchise. It has intelligent storytelling, usually pacing its delivery of content with care for those who want it, while the rest have a good amount of alternatives to occupy their time until the next expansion launches with a bunch of new stuff to do and explore, either alone or with friends. A player will eventually have to socialize or join up with other players because there's a roadblock of some kind that can't be overcome alone. The auction house doesn't require direct face-to-face player interaction, but loses its purpose the moment there's only one player logged into the game, which is an impossible scenario given there are many realms to pick and choose from. I find it impossible to consider WoW a true single-player game due to its MMO nature. It's possible to solo almost all of its content, Legacy, and most of the current expansion, but you still play with the notion that you're not surrounded by nothing else than NPCs. Comparatively, the .hack franchise primarily takes place in an MMORPG. The world and the two series of the games for the PS2 are amazing single-player games, even though you team up with one or two other NPCs throughout each volume story. The difference in narrative and storytelling is night and day, with a lot more felt emotion. To be fair, I'm biased because I absolutely love the franchise. The games, anime, and manga are really enjoyable to consume for me, and I go back to them regularly. Anyways, to answer the original question, WoW is a good multiplayer game that has deeply immersive single-player content that organically allows for groups of people wanting to socialize with others to form, without hindering those that don't want to interact with anyone from enjoying their escapism. Yeah, he brought up a lot of good points that I also brought up when I was responding to other comments and stuff. This guy, he responds to basically all of the comment response videos. And, like, this is another thing I see. Usually, for my normal videos, I mean, I get comments on them, but they're usually pretty small or something, like, talking about the video itself. But in these types of videos, where I'm literally, like, starting a discussion, I get multiple, like, paragraph length comments, and which is great, but also kind of makes it hard to pick and choose ones from the comment response things. So since there's so many paragraph length responses, or they talk about like all the points in the video, I can only pick out so many of them. And I'm only saying that because I do notice a lot of people who reply to basically all of them. I don't pick their comments. And it's basically because I can only pick so many of these really long ones in any one video. If you have a better chance of being featured if you make your point in as few words as possible. I'm just saying that for future reference, even though I agree with a lot of the things this particular person brought up. Especially since they kind of worded some of the things I said earlier in more elegant ways. And his last little sentence kind of summarizes it very good. Like, there's lots of single-player things to do in WoW, but there's also the option of multiplayer, which you can jump into at any time. Or you can ignore it and compete, keep doing solo stuff. The fact that the option is there, I think, kind of gives a solo player option more value to it. Whereas instead, you could just play another game which was designed for single player only. Alright, next comment. I was playing Final Fantasy 11, I think, back in 2003, and the game was unsoloable. You had to join a full group from about level 10 onwards, and it would usually take about an hour to form a group unless you were a tank or a healer. Yeah, I remember those times. Trying to find a group of my max level hunter back in Wrath of the Lich King. I was like, well, I'm going to start searching for a dungeon group so I can gear up. They're like, can you do 2k the DPS? I was like, what's DPS? They're like, yeah, we're not bringing you. Okay, I guess I'm not finding a group tonight. One of the things I actually liked about WoW when I started playing it like 8 or so years ago was that you could level on your own. It's cathartic, but I could level with my friends and get the recruiter friend XP bonus as well if I wanted. Plus, by that point, the group finder was there, and queues were pretty short because they all had like 8 million players or something. But in terms of actual discussion, I agree. WoW is a great single-player game for certain types of people. Certain other types of people may disagree, but the game gives you a choice, so who cares? It's interesting to note that you needed a group in order to level up in an MMO. Like, that sounds terrible. I don't think I'd play WoW if I needed to group up in order to quest, because that just sounds so unfun to me. Okay, next comment. It's probably been nearly 3 years since I've spoken to another person in WoW. Have literally not even typed a word in the chat box. This guy, he is what I aspire to be. I wish I could just play WoW and literally never talk to anyone. Next comment. Hello, are you American me? Seriously though, I totally agree with WoW is a great single player game. Your story is almost identical to mine. Straight A's, part-time jobs, and customer focused. Was a tour guide for a long time and then a call center agent. Was also very into acting at the time. The last thing I wanted to do in my free time was to interact with random people online after long days of work. I'm glad there's other people out there who had the same kind of very busy social lives and just wanted to sit down, relax, and play a game at the end of the day. I haven't been in a guild or spoken to anyone in WoW directly for 3 years. I still enjoy all the soul aspects of the game, particularly leveling alts, gold farming, and AH, mount, and pet farming collecting. I was in a guild at the end of Cata for a bit and quite enjoyed trying to raid/tank, but I think that lasted about 6 months. The soul aspects of the games are just so relaxing for me. Yeah, like the soul aspects in WoW are really relaxing. And you know what? That's not exciting for some people. You can have a lot more fun playing another single-player game, which, you know, is true. I'm at the kind of point where I kind of want to play something to relax. And when I'm in the mood to play something more exciting, I usually do that on the weekends or something. Alright, next comment. My social experience in WoW pretty much centers around my guild, and it's very ideal. I can do my own thing and still converse with people, whereas when grouping up, I feel a kind of pressure to help this person with everything and get way off track. Back when I used to play in a vanilla/BC private servers, I'd find people who wanted to group up for everything, including things you did not have to group up for, and it got annoying. Back then, Quest Loop didn't drop for all players, and more often than not, I'd get people who had me help them kill Gortas, get their livers, and then leave, and that made me feel like I wasted my time. There's another perk of playing solo. The other person responsible for time management is you, and you have no one but yourself to blame if your time is mismanaged. I can't tell you how many times I've said, the quest is this way, and they go, well, let's look over here anyway. And what do you know, it wasn't where they looked. Sorry if it makes me sound cold-hearted, but if I wanted online social interaction, I'd go on Twitter. I'm on WoW to play the game first and foremost. Yeah, that's another thing about the classic WoW thing, is a lot of the quests have you collect items from mobs, and those collected items don't really share. So sure, while grouping up can help you with a lot of the kill X amount of things quests, there's also an equal amount of collect X amount of things from mobs. So you can't really group up for everything. Or, I mean, I guess you still could, because if you group up with someone, you just kill the mobs faster, which would kind of even out having to kill an extra amount of them so that both players could get all the quest items they needed. This is just a interesting perspective. Alright, next comment. No, because you can't solo the newest raid tier by yourself. Those people say are lying to make themselves feel MLG. In all seriousness, there is good solo content and good group content. So it's more of a hybrid than being one or the other. Yeah, I guess that's true. It's more of a, because both of them exist, that kind of elevates the solo content above a boring game or something. And that's also true. You can't do the hardest content in the game by yourself. So the very core of it, people would argue WoW is not a single player game because you cannot complete the highest level of raiding by yourself. And it's like, at that point, what even is considered a solo game? Is it something you have to complete? Is it something you have to do on the hardest difficulty? I don't think so. Because, there's so many other things to do that don't require having to clear the hardest thing in the game. Like, I don't know, I made a whole video about it. I'm not going to go over it again. Let's try to blitz through the rest of these comments. Hey hero, this has nothing to do with the video, but you should really cast Void Bolt more. Every third cast should be a Void Bolt. I think in the video footage, I was doing a quest for the war campaign, and I was playing Shadow. I'll have you know, I main a Disc Priest, and my Shadow Priest is only used for island expeditions, so he is completely centered around AoE. That being said, hey, I use Void Bolt whenever I feel like it. Next comment. After the shit show with WoW and Blizzard have put out the last couple of months, thank God you have your Yu-Gi-Oh channel. For those of you who don't know, I have a Yu-Gi-Oh channel that does very well for itself. It does good enough where if my WoW channel died tomorrow, I'd still be able to do YouTube full-time because the Yu-Gi-Oh channel is doing so well. So, take all of this, all of my opinions and everything as a detached perspective from Blizzard. I do have a vested investment in their video game doing well because I do make, a little bit more than half of my income from my WoW channel. But also, I make enough for my Yu-Gi-Oh channel where if I had to focus on that full-time, I'd still be able to do YouTube full-time as a living. And then I could probably just start up a new channel on something else. I don't know, I have lots of hobbies and stuff. So I don't have all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. And also, Blizzard doesn't really like me anyway. So the fact that I talk positively about them should just be my own personal opinions on these things. Blizzard, they don't like me. And also, my income would be fine if their game went under. And despite all of that, I still have almost nothing but positive things to say about the game, which should tell you a little something, because there's the whole notion that the only real things said are negative things. I don't know. That's just a psychological thing. Negative things just feel more real. This doesn't really have anything to do with what this guy said. I just like talking about this because everybody should know this. Just because something is negative doesn't make it more real than a positive opinion. It's just our stupid monkey brains are programmed to remember negative things more effectively because, it's a survival trait. If someone's rude to you at the store, you'll probably think about it for the rest of the day. Whereas you won't think about the other 50 or 100 people you walked by who were not mean to you, or the people who were even nice to you, held the door open for you. You forget about them because positive things just don't register in your brain because they're kind of more frequent. But the negative things, yeah, you're definitely going to think about that. And because there's so many emotions tied to negative things, it makes them feel more real. And this is why depression is such a big problem. Depression, whole mental health issues. It's basically your brain telling you that you're not good enough or everything about you is wrong. And those are negative things. And because they're negative thoughts, they must be true. And that's why it's so much of a problem and why it's hard to fight. Because if anyone says anything positive to you, they're obviously just lying to make you feel better. It's only the people who are mean. Man, I need to move on. What the hell did you have? And also, before I go on to the next one, I may have casually said, excuse me, a little bit earlier on that, Blizzard, they don't like me. I have reasons for why I say that I'll probably talk about in another discussion video, because that's kind of a long topic. It's not really a big deal. They can actively hate me and, mess with my channel. And the fact that they leave me alone, that's great. They're just not going to give me any kind of special treatment, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, Blizzard doesn't like Asmongold either, and look how well he's doing. So let's go on to the next comment. What the hell did you have 4-hour practices for? That's kind of standard when your team is actually good. Because, there's a lot that goes into practice. Sometimes people will practice even longer than that. If anything, 4 hours is very standard. If you practice for less than 4 hours, your team probably doesn't care about winning. Because, 1 hour of that is just the warm-up and the cooldown at the end. And that leaves you with 3 hours of actual practice. And there's so much you have to do. And you only get 4 days of practice. No, 3 days. Because you have to have a very light day before the game day on Friday. So you only really have Monday through Wednesday in order to have actual legit practice. And then Thursday is basically just going over a very light practice before the Friday game. And then they try to get in as much practice, before the season starts as possible. If you've ever played sports, it's not a very unreasonable number. Unless you played in a bad team or something. Then, probably 2 hours of practice a day sounds about right. I'm going to try to blitz through these last ones and not go off on tangents like I did last time. Next comment. Well, the real question is WoW a good game, just generally? And the answer is not anymore. It used to be, but the modern game literally makes it impossible to seek out any sort of challenge short endgame mythics. Blizzard forces everything into dull mode. If we go back to the question, is WoW a good single-player game? The answer is even a more empathetic no, because a soloist, Blizzard doesn't allow you to run dungeons, heroics, or raids via LFR/LFG until you completely outgear the content. And even endgame, there is very little content you can do solo that actually presents any sort of challenge. In fact, I think there's no content now. 0. You would have to pug Mythic Pluses, I suppose, but that's a very tiny box to squeeze out of fun. This comment goes under the assumption that the only solo player content that is valid is hard solo player content, or challenging solo player content. And in that sense, there isn't really any solo player content, because all of the hardest and challenging portions of the game are tied to group stuff only. You can't raid, do dungeons, or PvP by yourself. Those are only multiplayer things. So in that sense, WoW is not a single player game. But if you're not talking about challenging endgame content, then there is tons and tons of things to do in the game, to the point where I have a 20-minute video going over a lot of them. And that's why I haven't really gone into any specifics, because I have a very long video that I don't really want to link it. If you just look up top 10 alternative things to do in WoW, you should be able to find it. There's a lot of things to do in the game, and all of it just takes a very long time to do. There's a lot of very relaxing stuff to do in WoW. But, you are correct in the fact that there's no challenging solo player content. Okay, and I think this is the last comment. I'm mainly a solo player. My main reason for soloing the game is because I love the lore and want to explore everything, listen to the NPCs talk, and just see everything. I find when I'm in a group, people just want to run from quest to quest and not enjoy all the effort and details that are in the game, so I just poke along at my own pace. I have nothing against people or doing dungeons/raids, but anything with lore content, I'm sure to revisit when I can solo it and see everything. Yeah, that's true. Many people don't read quests or don't listen to dialogues and just don't care. And they see questing as just a means to the end of endgame. so that they can get to the real meat of the game. So most people just skip all that. They don't read quest texts, and then they complain about Blizzard and their bad writing. That's like another. That is going to be another discussion video. Does BFA have bad writing? The answer to that is just a straight up no. Like, not at all. It's actually really good. But why is there such a common perception that BFA has bad writing? And that is actually a really good discussion to have, because it's more nuanced than that. Because, I mean, one, most people don't read quest texts. That's a big part of it. People don't actually know anything about the lore outside of maybe watching a Noble video or two. And then they form very strong opinions against WoW's writing on not knowing anything about the game. But, there are also some people who do know everything about lore and hate everything about it. Not very many, though. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of other YouTubers who know a lot about the game's lore and actually read all of the questings and the extra stuff, the books, the little short stories. All of those people who read everything, a majority of them, I'd say like 90% of them, like the lore and would actually defend that a lot of it's pretty good. But I also know some people who just hate everything about it. I say some people. I know literally one person who hates the lore so much, and he reads everything about it. And I think it's just because he just really hates Sylvanas. Like, this guy just really hates Sylvanas' character and just uses everything in his power, every new story element, to just say how terrible Sylvanas is. I don't think that one really counts. He's more of an outlier. But then again, people who actually read all the quest texts and all of the extra materials, I'd say they're outliers as well, because that's not the majority of people. And also, this is like I said, this is a topic for its own discussion video. So I'm going to end it there. Good stuff. Basically, I need to make 2 more videos. One, does BFA have bad writing? The answer may shock you. And also another one, should you be loyal to the Blizzard brand? I think that one will probably have to come out first, because of, what happened with the whole Blizzard firing 8% of its workforce, and how people are using this as a, I'm not going to support Blizzard anymore type thing. And it's like, does that mean you were loyal to a company's brand in the first place? Are you one of those people who are super into Apple and hates everything that's not Apple products? I think that's a more nuanced discussion, because while I may say, don't be loyal to any company's brand because companies only care about making money, like, that being said, it's more of an emotional thing. Or it could also be more fact-based, because, I will definitely give a Blizzard game a try if Blizzard is making a new game, because they have a really good track record with me. And that is a form of brand loyalty. Despite the fact that I would also say in the next sentence, don't be loyal to any brands. So, interesting discussion topics in which, it's a more nuanced thing. That being said, this is a comment response video. I don't make comment responses to comment responses. And I don't really reply to too many comments in these either, because I have my hands messed up and I can't really type. But, that being said, you can still leave comments and everything. I'll probably read through them. I will definitely not make another comment response, though, to the comment response. And I only say that because I get a lot of comments on my comment response videos basically arguing with me as if I was going to make another one. Which is fine. I mean, you're free to argue with me as much as you want. I don't censor criticism. The only thing I censor is the things YouTube forces me to, Also, YouTube does a really good job of moderating the comment section. So it's not really a problem. I can count the amount of times I've had to delete a comment on one hand. It's 2. I've deleted 2 comments in my entire time of doing a YouTube. One of them was because this guy argued with my points in a video, and I made a comment response, defending my opinions in the video, and then he deleted my comment. And then made another comment, just talking more trash about the video. And then I replied to him again, and he just kept deleting my comments. I was like, I didn't know you could delete, the YouTuber's comments on their own video as long as it was in reply to your comment. And since he kept deleting my comments, I deleted his. So that was more of a, I didn't really care that the fact that he was trash talking the video as much as it was him deleting my comments in response to his, because there's plenty, I'd say like half of my comments are talking shit about the videos I make. I'd have to spend all day deleting those comments if I was ever going to bother with that. And the other comment I deleted was recently, and it was basically this guy who was telling people to kill themselves. And for some reason, YouTube didn't auto-flag it like it usually does. So I think I just hid the comment too. I didn't really delete it. And the only reason I bothered with that is because it was getting a lot of upvotes. So I was like, yeah, let's stop this comment. Anyways, until the next discussion video, I guess.